All right, this is Patrick Rogers, and today we have the privilege to have Will Nitze on the show, and Will is the CEO of IQBAR. Welcome to the show, Will.
Thanks for having me.
You bet, man. So a little bit about Will. He's the founder and CEO of IQBAR, the nation's leading brain and body nutrition startup, which is something I'm very passionate about, that kind of stuff. So I can't wait to learn more. IQBAR products are sold in over 10,000 locations nationwide, as well as on all major e-commerce platforms. So I can't wait to dig in, Will, and learn more about your journey and IQBAR and what you guys do in the products. Before we do that, what's one interesting fact about yourself that maybe not many people know?
Uh, I'm not really passionate about consumer goods. How about that? Really not passionate about protein bars or hydration mixes or instant coffees, all of which we make. I'm really passionate about building businesses,
Mm,
and that happens to be the business type I've picked. But yeah, we can get into the delineation between those two things. I think it's actually a critical delineation, but I bet most people would not guess that about me.
interesting. So then what led you to the path that you're on with this current the products that you guys offer? What led you to that?
Yeah. So I am really passionate about nutrition. Um, just not necessarily the productization of that. But so that was what kicked things off in 2016, 2017. I had a job, was working really long hours for a software company, had a terrible diet, felt like crap every day, and was getting headaches, brain fog, memory issues, yada yada. And it was pretty obvious to me that it was mostly diet based. And so
Mm,
I became kind of obsessed with diet at that point, and paleo was really
mm.
blowing up at that time, and Whole 30 and a couple other
Oh
sort of
yeah.
adjacent diets. And so I kind of just started eating a paleo diet and cutting carbs out,
Hmm.
rice, sugar, pasta, etc.,
Hmm.
bread, and just felt way
Yeah,
better.
yeah,
More energy, less headaches, and I was like, damn, okay,
yeah.
that works. And then I read a couple books that totally changed my mind on things. One of them being Grain Brain. I don't know if you've ever read that, but
Mm-mm.
basically charting more so on a longitudinal basis. Okay, what if there's the what if I eat a pizza today? How do I feel at 3 p.m.? And then there's
Right.
the what if I eat a pizza today and every day for the next 30 years? What happens to my brain when I'm 65?
Yeah.
And that's a whole other can of worms. And it basically scared the hell out of me and got me really interested in maybe trying to create something to solve this problem, at
Sure.
least in some way.
Yeah, very cool. I love that you're talking about. I've had a personal experience myself. It was about 10 years ago, and I was consuming all kinds of grains and breads and pastas, and I had a very similar experience. My doctor cut me off of them, and I just realized, wow, my body feels night and day. I can actually think. There's no more brain fog after eating meals.
Yeah, it's wild. I think a lot of people think like the human experience is feeling a certain way. And until you feel like radically better and you're like, oh, I didn't realize that you could
No
just
idea.
feel that way instead on a daily basis.
Yeah.
They
Yeah,
just
yeah.
don't know.
Gotcha. So that kind of led you down a path of diet for yourself and education. So then what led you to the business products then?
Yeah, I mean, at the same time, I was really interested in entrepreneurship and startups, and
Yeah.
startups were fully, cool by that period. And entrepreneurship was cool, and I didn't have kids, and I didn't have a mountain of debt, and so the risks inherent to taking the leap were not huge. I didn't have a
Nice.
giant salary, so I didn't have golden handcuffs or anything like that.
Nice. Nice.
And so I was like, all right, I've always wanted to start something. Oh, and by the way, it didn't hurt that I didn't really love my job, and that was super stressful. So I actually tell people to go get a job right out of college, learn what that's like, and then you
Right.
can juxtapose that
Right. You can
with
appreciate the difference.
yeah. But so all those things combined, and I was like, all right, I'm never going to get another, let's say, 6, 7, 8 year stretch where it's like better to start a company than this.
Mm,
And so I was like, all right, how do I create a ready to eat thing that is a brain, basically how do I create brain food would be the
Yeah.
shortest way
Yeah.
of putting it.
Okay.
And I had no idea where to start. So what I did was I called every consumer goods entrepreneur in Boston, sat down with them, asked them 100 questions. How did you start? How do you set up a supply chain? Do you incorporate as a LLC or a C corp?
Wow.
What should your cost, what should my COGS be on one unit? What should my gross margin be? Blah, 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 right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then just sort of triangulated all the answers into a rough roadmap. And so that was how I started.
Gotcha. I know you said that one of the things that allowed you to be very as successful as you are, and by the way, you're up over 30 million in annual sales now. Is that right?
Right about, yeah, we're like right on that nose at this point in time.
Congratulations. That's very impressive for what
Thank you.
7-year-old company. Um, was your channel selection and go-to market strategy? Why don't you tell us a little bit more about that and how that's been critical for your success?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's as simple. I like to always like take things at first principles. So, like, let's say you make a thing, you have to sell it somewhere, right? And in the traditional way of selling a food item, or I think what most people think is kind of the way to do it, is you go to the grocery store down the road and you sell it to
Sure.
them, and
Yeah. Yeah.
then you sell it to more franchises within that chain, and then you sort of grow your concentric circle, and now you're everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And we did it the inverse of that. Even within that, they'll say, let's just stay in brick and mortar. They'll say, start at natural, Whole
Mm-hmm.
Foods, and then do well there and go to conventional, Kroger, say, then go to big box, so
Mm-hmm.
Target, Walmart, and then go to club,
Mm-hmm.
Costco, Sam's Club, BJ's.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So those are the two things. We did the opposite of both of those things. We started online, and we had the benefit of, it's not a refrigerated or frozen item. It's, bars are rectangular prisms. They ship that aren't that heavy. They ship well, long shelf life, et cetera. And so our first go-to-market decision was we're going to build a big online business to start. And I would do it the same way over again, knowing what I know now. And then once we built a critical mass there, what we learned is you could leverage that to then get brick and mortar, right? Because
Oh,
if a
okay.
brick and mortar category manager is like, well, why should I bring you in? You can say, well, I have 10,000 customers who buy us on Amazon
Interesting.
in your zip code, right? And because I have all this data, because you get data from online and you don't in most ways,
Gotcha.
in brick and mortar. And so once we built up a big business there, we thought, okay, now do we want to go that standard, natural, conventional big box club route? And we said no, like we want to do, for better or worse, scale faster. And so we actually started in places like Kroger, and then we got into Walmart. We actually got into Walmart because of our Amazon presence, which
Mm,
may sound funny, right? Like the
right.
Walmart buyer looks to
Yeah.
Amazon top
Interesting.
bars or whatever the
Yeah.
category is to make brick and mortar decisions. And so we went in there early, and then we went into Costco pretty early. Most food and bev companies, you need to be at 40, 50 million, and you're 10 years in, and
Yeah.
now we're ready for Costco.
Right.
I mean, we went in like 3.5 years in
Interesting.
and did great. And there's a whole set of reasons why, right? You have to hit the right product, the right offer, the right price point, blah, blah, blah. But net, like, what's the so what of all of it?
Mm-hmm.
I think our overarching strategy is pick fewer channels that scale very well. Amazon would be an example, and like, let's say Costco would be another example. To double your revenue on Amazon or to double your revenue on Costco, you don't need to hire double the people. You might not even need to hire a single more additional person. And so that just scales very well versus, oh, I have to go sell into another 10 bodegas, right? I need another salesperson, or go up and down the street. And so why do you do that? You do that because it's capitally efficient and you can scale really quickly.
Gotcha. Very interesting. Yeah, because you're not adding the other side, the front side of the business, the sales, the marketing, the account managers. You're just maybe adding increase in production. And depending on how your back end and your supply chain is set up, value chain, that may or may not require more people, or if it is, it's minimal.
Yeah, I mean, you're just turning the same dials you were
Yeah,
already turning. You're just
yeah,
turning them harder. You're throwing gas on the fire, and investing more heavily. I mean, and that's a whole other thing, right? Money, in consumer goods, you need money. Some people will try and bootstrap a consumer goods company. I'm a massive fan of capital efficiency, but I'm also a massive fan of, raise enough money to allow you to run really fast.
mm,
Um, and so there's that middle ground. Because we couldn't have done all this stuff, right, unless you have a couple $1,000,000 to withstand
yeah,
cash flow crunches and things like that.
yeah. What did you do there? Did you bring in friends, family, investors? Did you do seed rounds?
So we started with angels, and I actually think I would do the fundraising path we've taken
Mm-hmm.
the exact same way. It started with angels, which is great because get better terms, you get it quicker, more founder slash company friendly,
Mm,
and you get a bunch of people who are on the boat now and they want you to win too. Um, and then we actually did that for 2 rounds, raised I think 600K, and then a year later 1 million, and then a year after that, or a year and a half after that, we raised a small amount of money, 2.775 million, I think was the tally. Could have raised 5 or 6 or 7, and we raised that because it was the least amount we needed to raise to get to the next step
right.
change in
Gotcha.
revenue. That was our first institutional money. And that was a learning process. Came
I
with
bet.
totally different terms and covenants and
Right.
clauses,
Right.
and they lock your equity up and yada yada. So I guess if I could do the angel thing all the way through, I
Right.
would, right? But at some
Got it.
point, there are only so many people who can write $500,000 checks.
Right. Right.
And so, and then we raised one final round from actually a strategic, a big company called Lotus Bakeries, multi-billion-dollar Belgian company that makes Biscoff cookies.
Oh, okay.
They invested $5 million in us, and so that was different. So I've done it. I've done it all. I've done angels,
Yeah.
venture capital, and then like company investment. But they each hit it, I think, the right time in our life cycle.
Yeah, fantastic. That's really good feedback to have, and it's good for people to hear. There are people out there, there are CEOs trying to bootstrap consumer products, and it definitely does hold back their growth, but you also have to know what to do with it. You have to be very, very, very good about knowing what to do with it, right? Um, so speaking of, I know you mentioned also that operational excellence and cost controls is something that's been very, I know we kind of talked about some of that by, playing that in with your go-to-market strategy and your strategic moves there. But speak to operational excellence and cost controls and how that's been critical for you.
Yeah, I mean, it just is the case that gross margin is beyond having a good product, which is
Mm-hmm.
table stakes. Like
Mm-hmm.
the next thing, there's really 3 things: have a great
Yeah.
product, have a
Yeah.
really good gross margin, and have this smallest SG&A possible, meaning
Sure. Absolutely.
team. Um, and so that's really on the gross margins side. And I can't tell you how much better your life is if you have a 55% gross margin than if you have a 35 or 40% gross margin. I mean, it's just
It's not much left.
what you can do is so radically different. What you can invest back is so radically different. I think a lot of people in the zero interest rate environment, when they're raising tons of money, they just thought, well, who cares? It's all a top line game, and I'm not going to really, squeeze our supply chain and obsess over our supply chain such that we hit that gross margin, because
Yeah.
we're just going to keep trying to grow the top line and then try and sell the business. Then 2022 happened, interest rates went way up, fundraising dried up, and everyone's like, oh crap,
Now what?
we need to be a default alive business that's
Mm-hmm.
not reliant on external financing. And I wish we would have, invested in getting a greater gross margin earlier. But I mean, how you do it is relatively simple, right? Which is just negotiate with all your suppliers. A lot of people don't do this. They literally pick up the phone and call your supplier and say, hey, I need to be at this price. What can I do to get there? And there's always a variety of ways you can get there. Optimizing freight, optimizing parcel shipping, optimizing packaging. There's so much you can do. And each point you claw back, it's like, That's another hire I can make. That's another 50,000 I can invest in Amazon advertising, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure. And that's bottom line. That's net profit. That's bottom line savings.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I think one of the challenges is a lot of people who get into consumer good businesses aren't business people,
Mm,
right? It's like they're just people.
right.
And they created something great and a lot of people like it. And then a couple years in, they're like, oh crap, like, but my gross margin sucks. And
Yeah.
they're like lost about what to do about that. The good news again is it's relatively simple.
Mm,
Um, there's always a path. So we just obsess. We just obsess. I don't know how else to put it other than we think about it a lot and take a lot of actions on it.
mm, gotcha. Okay. Awesome. I know you said one of the biggest failures you had was not focusing more on product.
Yeah. I mean, that's a weird one. But like, this is another thing a lot of people, this is less so of that archetype of the person who just created something great and now they don't get their gross margin. There's a separate archetype of someone who's like, I'm just an e-com whiz and maybe my business before was drop shipping and now I have this product or I created this great product and all they think about, all they obsess over is
Mm,
advertising efficiency and customer acquisition cost. And all of that is so critically important, but dramatically less important than the product
mm,
being great. Like the number one way you can reduce your customer, well, not, I mean, in some ways you can reduce your customer acquisition cost by having a great product, but let's just say increase your lifetime value, which
mm-hmm.
lifetime value to customer acquisition cost is like the ratio everyone cares about.
Right.
So how do you make that ratio way better by increasing lifetime value? You have a better product. It really
Sure.
is as simple as that. If someone consumes your product and they then consume it 2, 3, 4 times, like it's the classic thing. It's way easier to get someone to rebuy than it is to acquire a new customer. And you're always going to be behind the eight ball if you don't have that flywheel going. I would venture as far as to say that the business can't work without that. Um, and so if people, I think people stop at pretty good is the issue. It's not that
Nice.
like they have a bad product.
Yeah.
Maybe some do,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I think it's that they have a pretty good product and they fail to think, what if I made this 20% better?
Mm,
What would that do for all of my metrics?
sure.
And for whatever reason, people like so often just stop at pretty good.
Mm. So let's say I'm CEO of a consumer products brand or product, whatever product line, and I do a self reflection and I see that I am pretty good. What would you suggest to them to go from pretty good to great?
Man, it's really tricky. If I had a great answer to that, it's like, I'd be a billionaire. But
You're well on your way, man.
just look at the like fundamentals, right? So it
Mhm.
depends on what you're selling. What it's again, go back to first principles. What do people want out of that type of item?
Mm.
Maybe they, you know, maybe you're trying to deliver something that's zero sugar and they're like, dude, I don't care about sugar. Like,
I mean,
put
would
more
you,
sugar,
yeah,
right?
would,
So,
yeah.
which is of course just product market fit, right? Match your value propositions to what people actually want. But people gloss over that too. It's like, no, confirm exactly what that consumer wants. Is
Mm.
your product delivering it? If you're pretty good, it's sort of delivering it. Where is it falling short? And then just like, again, go back to first principles and hammer out, like iterate, brute iterate. I think a lot of why people don't do this, it sucks to iterate. It's really tiring and it's exasperating. And you'd rather just twist a few dials in your Facebook ad manager
Right.
than have to like go back to the R&D lab and bang out 30 more iterations, right? It's
Mm.
just, it sucks. But it's everyone knows where their product falls short, right? Just survey 30 people or just look at your reviews, right? Like people will
Yeah.
just tell you.
Yeah.
I don't think it's an issue that you don't know. I genuinely think it's an issue of it's really hard and you don't want to, or you're just
Mm.
whatever, you're
Complacent,
so
maybe.
burned out. Maybe you've
Yeah.
already iterated
Yeah.
50 times to get to pretty good. Probably you did.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I'm staring down the barrel of that again.
Yeah. Yeah, because you're like you put in all this energy and effort, but you're not quite there, and you're like getting burnt out, complacent. No, I totally get it. Um, so what's next for you guys? What's next for IQ Bar?
Global domination.
Nice.
No,
You're supposed to go like this when you say that.
yeah. Um, More of the same. Like it's kind of the similar principle of
Okay.
pick channels that scale. It's like also keep doing things that scale. Grow within the channel. I mean, I say this all the time. There are infinity people. For
Mm,
all intents and purposes, there are infinity people. And as a consumer company, you sell to people. And so it's like the market is so freaking big, especially in
mhm.
America.
Yeah.
And so there's some crazy stat. I think it's like 1 in 12 Americans are a millionaire. 1 in 12 is a millionaire out of 350 million people. Um,
It's
so
interesting.
it's just like there's so many people and there's so much money that if you create like if you find things that are working, almost certainly the best move is to just press harder on that
Mm,
gas. It's so hard to exhaust. Again, if you pick the right channels, exhaust that channel.
gotcha.
And so I think that for us, it's just more of the same, like just try and double our goal is to double the business this year. And I think it's going to be through the same channels we are already in.
Double your annual revenue this year?
Yeah.
Fantastic. What do you think are some of the challenges that you, with given your current state where you're at now, what do you think are some of the biggest challenges that you'll have in doing that, or bottlenecks?
I mean, we have a tiny team. We have 6 office employees. We run our own warehouse as well, but
Okay. Uh-huh.
like that's tiny for the amount of
6 for
revenue we
30
do.
million. That's insane.
Yeah. So that's just hard. Everyone's wearing a lot of hats and operationally it's tricky, right? It's not so simple as, hey, go make 2 times what we made last month. Like, yes, you do that, but there
Right.
are downstream impact. Like
Sure.
the work does go up, and yet your head count doesn't go up. So you do have to account for that in some way. And so if you have a hub and spoke model of a small team and then
Hmm.
really thoughtful third parties around it, you can bridge that gap. But I think operations, just being operationally excellent, does get harder. So that'll be a challenge at let's say 2 times the size. Keeping people motivated. We all work very hard. How do you keep everyone motivated and rowing in the same direction? Um, we just did a brand refresh, so making sure that goes well and smooth out any issues. There's always going to be issues when you change the look of and feel of your product. Um, and so
Well,
just
you brought up something there. I mean, you have 6 people. You guys are doing 30 million in revenue, and you're about to double it this year. And you mentioned motivating your people. That's a lot. They're wearing a lot of hats, a lot of people doing a lot of different things, a lot of responsibilities there. How do you, I mean, and this is probably a maybe we can pop on for another podcast sometime, but how do you motivate your team? Like what's your overarching strategy to keep people happy when they're obviously taking on a lot of responsibilities, wearing a lot of hats and doing a lot of things? What's the key for you?
give people financial upside, right? That's the most obvious one. Um,
Like
yeah,
when,
they should win financially if you get to the finish line, which is our goal, by the way.
yeah.
Um, I think we'll try and sell the business at the end of this year. We'll see how that goes. So like that's an obvious one, right? Everyone likes that. Give them a lot of responsibility. Um, People like to have responsibility, contrary to maybe what you might think, or at least certain people like get
Yeah.
people on the team who want
Who
that.
want that? Yeah.
We don't micromanage, which is convenient because we couldn't, because we don't have enough people. Um, so everyone has just a lot of autonomy and what they do matters. Like their actions fundamentally shift the trajectory of the company. Like, and that's not hyperbole. That's just literally the case for everyone. And that's kind of
Yeah.
cool, right? There
Yeah.
is no
Yeah.
middle management, there is no fluff, there is no bloat. Like the spotlight's on everyone. And I think the key is just find people who like that because there's nothing worse than being another number in a giant company, and it may sound cool that you don't have scrutiny on you, but ultimately people want
Mm,
accountability, I think. Um,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
then just like growing and winning, right? People, it's a snowball. So if you can keep going up and to the right, it keeps being fun.
Sure.
I think, when shit hits a fan and you nosedive, now it's like, damn, how do you motivate people in that sort of
Yeah.
trough?
Yeah.
I actually don't know the answer to that because we haven't hit a trough, but
Right. Right.
maybe if we do, we'll hop back on and I'll give you a better answer. But that I think is much tougher than if you keep growing.
Got it. Love it. Um, well, awesome. Well, good luck this year on doubling your revenue, and it sounds like you're going to have an eventual sale here pretty quick, which is I love hearing that. A lot of people are CEOs are just thinking long term, and you're kind of like, it sounds like, well, sometimes the best time to get out is when things are going really well, and for whatever reason. So
Or not, it's so personal. It's like keep going if you want to keep going.
yeah,
Sell if you want to sell. It's
totally.
like,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Don't be attached to any one specific direction. So let me ask, if you were going to hire a CEO to take the reins for your company, Will, what's the one book you'd require he or she read before taking over for you, and why?
Ooh, I'll probably give him a couple. I really love Traction by Gabriel Weinberg.
Uh-huh.
And it's either Nick Maris or Justin Maris. Um, brothers.
Justin Mares.
Justin. Okay, cool. Those are two brothers who are in CPG actually.
Okay.
Really love that book. I think again, because it just via first principles looks at like every way you can grow your company and get traction. I think a
Mm,
lot of people assume, oh, I'm starting company X. What did other companies like that do to get traction?
yeah.
And that's really not what you should do. It shouldn't be backwards looking. It should be, what is the exhaustive menu of things I could even possibly do?
Yeah.
And then testing all of them, looking at the data in some cost effective way, looking at the data, and then 80/20ing in on the 20% that really moved the needle.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and I love that, like first principles, objective, exhaust all options, and then get really focused on what works. I just like that methodology.
Love it. I love it. I haven't read the book, but I'm familiar with it, and I've heard other people talk very highly of it. So yeah, awesome. Let me take a few minutes, Will, and summarize some of my key takeaways. One is having your go-to market strategy was quite the inverse of what traditional uh, a thought process might be. Is you actually took and you built a critical mass with online business, Amazon, and then that allowed you to have clout almost in the marketplace and made it a lot easier to go to brick and mortar locations. You had also said to not bootstrap growing a consumer goods company, or at least in your experience, it worked out really well for you. And you started with angels. You also then went into VC and a strategic. But had you been able to do it all over again and maybe had some different options, maybe just stuck with angels. Operational excellence and cost controls. And the biggest takeaway there I got from you is do everything you can to maintain as high of a gross margin as you can, which right is common sense, but believe it or not, a lot of companies aren't even measuring gross margin. So, number one, understanding what that is, and then number two is taking a deep dive in what you can do to work with your vendors and suppliers to get to that place. And like what you said, a lot of people don't take the time or energy to negotiate with their suppliers. Just call them up and say, I need to be here at this price. What can we do to get there? And really view them as more of a partner that wants you to be successful, which is absolutely true. I love that you talked about your customer lifetime value to customer acquisition cost. That ratio is very key, and just really going out to your marketplace, understanding, do I have a great product like I think I do, or do I have a mediocre or just a pretty good product, and figure out what you need to do to become a great product and go do it. Um, so let me ask for you, Will, if there was one takeaway that you'd really want the audience to get from our time together today, what would that be?
I don't even think it would be any of those things. All those things are
Yeah,
important. I think it would be, I say this often to other people, but just
yeah.
make sure you have your own house in order,
Mm,
personally and lifestyle wise. that's just, I think I got lucky that I started a business again when I was young, no
Yeah.
kids, no debt,
Yeah.
didn't have golden handcuffs of any kind. Like, I think that's lucky. Um, but for anyone trying to do something like this, do
Yeah.
something in the startup space,
Hmm.
I can't tell you how important it is that like you have, I mean, I guess you can do it if you're single, but let's say a supportive spouse
Right.
or
Right.
girlfriend or whatever. Um, you're gonna have to be willing to sacrifice hobbies, friendships, vacations, et cetera, et cetera. And just make sure that you're willing to do that for like 10 years. Because if you aren't, just save yourself the whole shebang.
Yeah.
Um, I think there was a period where money was really flowing in the zero interest rate environment, where I think there are a lot of like founder tourists, shall we say. It was easy to get money, and they're like, oh, why not? I'll start this thing. And then things got hard, and it's like, oh,
It's not
wait,
there
I
anymore.
actually really wasn't willing to make those 30 sacrifices.
Yeah.
And so just really think deeply about that because um, I mean, that's what separates, I think, perseverance is what separates founders ultimately, and you can't have perseverance if you don't have your house in order.
Mm, that's a great tip. I love that. Well, let me ask if any of our listeners wanted to reach out and get a hold of you for any follow-up questions, what's the best way they could do that?
Sure. LinkedIn is maybe the best one.
Perfect.
I'm pretty active there and I post daily there, almost daily. So yeah, Will Nitze, Nitze. IQBAR.com is our
Great.
website. And then same deal with like Instagram and social media platforms. But yeah, that's probably the best way to get to me.
Great. Awesome. Will, thanks again for being on the show. There was so many great tips and opportunities for improvement for any CEO in a business and leaders. So thanks again for coming on the show. This was fantastic.
Sounds good. Let's do it again.
Awesome. And for the listeners out there, please hit the like and subscribe button and help us spread the word about what we're doing. We're helping the next generation of CEOs and leaders be that much more successful. With that, this is your host, Patrick Rogers, and we'll see you in the next episode. Thanks a lot.